Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today, and I'm joined by my podcast partner, Tom Laidlaw, who's live from Los Angeles. Of course, he's the former NHL player with the New York Rangers and the Los Angeles King. But, Tom, you're out there for a different reason. You're there for Survivor. What do you got going on out there?
Well, first of all, look at the background. Is that Hollywood or what? Like, do I look like a real professional Hollywood movie star kind of thing, or what?
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely Hollywood. So
there you go. There you go. So we have the finale for Survivor is tonight. For the first time, this is the 39th season they've had Survivor, and this is the first time it's ever been taped. This finale. Usually it's live. For people that have followed the show, I got voted off early. I was voted off 5th overall out of 20 contestants. But after I got voted off, there's a lot of scandal that took place. Kind of stuff that was beyond, well, not kind of, but stuff that was beyond the game. There was a gentleman on the show who was a little bit too physically, intrusive with the young girls. He was warned about it, asked to not do it anymore. He continued to do it. He ultimately got kicked off the show. And then there's a lot of aftermath. There's some of the players on the team kind of used that to their own advantage during the game. And rightfully so, the people in the Me Too movement and others were very critical of the people, the way they handled it. It was the game, but people said, listen, this is far more important. The Me Too movement is far more important than the game of Survivor. I think a lot of people look back, these are young people getting caught up in the game. I think for the most part, good people, they look back and realize they probably didn't handle themselves properly, and they really regret the way it's happened. So there's a lot of hard feelings now. Like, some people are picking sides and everything. So it's quite a bit of tension around here in Hollywood right now.
how much, when you look back and your reasons for wanting to do this, are you happy with your experience? Did you get out of it what you hoped you would get out of it?
Great question. So when I went out there, I do all that motivational speaking now at True Grit Life. And I like to be able to say to people and really be able to back it up with my own actions, that if you want to do something, don't let age or height or race or your weight or whatever it is stop you from doing it if you have a goal or dream. So when I speak to people, I've been very lucky in my life, playing in the National Hockey League, being an agent. And this was another thing with, going on Survivor. I was the oldest player they had out there in the last 10 years. And I really wanted to play hard. Going out there that it really is a 1 in 20 chance of winning. And if I was either won or if I was going to get voted off, I wanted to be able to say, listen, I played hard and I played the way I wanted to play. And I felt really good about that when I got voted off. I said, well, I was disappointed I lost. But I carried myself the way I wanted to carry myself, and I was happy. After seeing all this stuff, and it happened all after I was gone. I was never associated with the other stuff. It kind of taints it for everybody that now the focus is on this other stuff. But that's the TV world, and going into it that potentially could happen. But again, I really felt like, now, and it's happened since I got off the show when I'm going speaking, to colleges or businesses. And I really say to them, listen, I'm not just talking about it here. I've done it. This is, if you want to do something, no excuses. Don't wait till tomorrow. You have an opportunity, go get it done. And I think it's really made a difference in my ability to speak to people about how to approach life.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Tom, you ended your career out in Los Angeles. When you were with the Kings, could you have envisioned yourself being part of, a Survivor type situation? Or did you think, wow, maybe I'll get into television? I mean, was that even on your radar back then?
Yes, and the hockey world, right? I mean, it's so much ingrained in you, especially being, this is going to sound a little but you're growing up in Canada on a farm, playing hockey. It's like there's a certain culture that you're kind of trained, that's ingrained in you, and it's all about team. And although I was funny and I liked having fun and everything like that, it was all about being humble and not sticking out in the crowd. And all of a sudden now, there you are walking out on a beach in Fiji with your underwear on, trying to, win $1 million in a game like Survivor. So it was. I remember when they first dropped us off on the island, and obviously you're going on Survivor, right? You know that's happening. But when they first dropped you off on the island, you're going, man, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is such a departure from the world I had in the past. But it was a blast. It was a great. And I think personally, it's just another one of those experiences where you say to yourself, listen, there really is nothing you cannot do. Like people are getting older, I hear themselves, maybe the career they're in is going well, and they go, oh God, I'm going to have to reinvent myself like it's a bad thing. I just think reinventing yourself at any age is a great thing. it's an opportunity. It's another opportunity to do something, to challenge yourself and get better at whatever you're doing. So it was great. Like I said, great experience. It is Hollywood. You understand that going in. It isn't going to be perfect. But I don't think I would have ever envisioned when I retired from playing that I was going to be walking around a beach in Fiji.
Have you gotten any other television opportunities through your appearance on Survivor or anything like that?
Yeah, a lot more opportunities come up. A lot of, I think, more speaking engagements where people want to go out and hear about the experience and really talk about it from the motivational side too. And from that has come, I'm a big believer in the whole military lifestyle, the discipline and dedication, all those things. And I'm doing a lot more things. I did a podcast the other day with a young gentleman, that Patrick Barr, who's a Navy SEAL, and trying to, telling everybody and myself about what it was like to go through BUD/S, the training process to become a Navy SEAL, and and why was he able to make it when others didn't make it. So it's really enhanced the whole True Grit lifestyle and all the people that follow it. So it's been good.
Based on what you know about that SEAL training, could you have been a SEAL?
Oh, that's you know what? It's that thing where the part of you goes, yeah, I could do it. Like I want to try to do it. But it was interesting hearing him talk about, some of the guys that were there were intimidating guys, the big muscular guys with tattoos and everything. And you think, God, and Pat, this guy's on, he's a smaller guy. He's not very big. And like when he first walked in, that was the first time. It's like, man, this is intimidating. How can I compete against these guys? And it had nothing to do with it, really. It's more that mental toughness. It doesn't matter how big you are, how strong you are. What can you endure? And that's what they're teaching you. One of the things he talked about was, first of all, understanding in the Navy SEAL, they really taught you this: life is not fair. So like in terms of the Navy SEAL world, they have got a mission to do. And when they go out for the mission, it doesn't matter what your feelings are, if you're sick or what it is, or if it's fair or not. Your job is to complete the mission. And it was interesting hearing him talk about that. And it's the same kind of thing I think I've learned, in my career. Like I wasn't that good of a player when I played. I had to battle through things. So, I think going out I would love to try the Navy SEAL training. That'd be a fantastic experience. And again, it's that mental toughness, preparing yourself to say, listen, you are going to be in pain. That is a fact of life. It is not going to be fair for you. It's just how much can it take? So I'd love to try it.
All right. Well, let's talk about a different form of mental toughness. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, since we've had a podcast, we've had the Taylor Hall trade. And he didn't end up with either team that you and I thought he would end up with. But, speaking of mental toughness, like I think John Chayka, the general manager of the Arizona Coyotes, has some of that. Like he's a guy that's very aggressive. And, he doesn't take no for an answer. And, you don't think of the Arizona Coyotes, how many years that they've been out of the playoffs, 7 years, as a team that's going to be a mover and a shaker. But they were in this instance because there were several teams competing for the rights to Taylor Hall. And the Arizona Coyotes, who at the time were first in the Pacific Division, they were the winner on it. And, I think the package they gave up has some risk to it, but I didn't think it was over the top. Like, they're going to pick, probably late in the draft. They're going to give up their first round pick, perhaps a third round pick, depending on if they re-sign them. They gave up a big 6'7" defensive prospect in Kevin Ball, who everybody likes, but he may not be ready for a couple of seasons. Another first round pick who's kind of considered a B prospect, and yet another prospect who's probably a B prospect as well. Did you think the Devils got enough, number one? And what do you think about it from the Coyotes' perspective?
Well, first of all, from the Devils' side, given what they were facing, like we talked about it before, Taylor Hall had that MVP season 2 years ago. But what Taylor Hall were you going to get? Like he came off an injury last year, and he really was kind of a shadow of his former self this year. It was like when you watched him play, you're like, I know he can be good, but he is not that good right now. So it's like, really, what are you giving up? It was a tough spot again because they're at the end of the season. It was clear. I read some articles today where they're saying they really didn't even have any contract negotiations because they just knew he was going to leave at the end of the year. And it wasn't, and apparently the way it all sounds, it wasn't like they were mad at him that he didn't give him a chance or whatever. It was just a foregone conclusion that he had a right, and he wanted to take that right to be a free agent at the end of the year, see what was out there in the open market, not only in terms of dollars, but in opportunities. He wanted to win, and the Devils were on that road to winning 2 years ago, but it just it fell off for them, and they've gotten farther away from winning. So I mean, I think they'll be all right down the road with the good young players they've got. So I think from the Devils' end to get what they've got, and that deal is good. I like what Phoenix did in the deal too. They got, my understanding, they got the Devils to pick up half of this year's salary remaining, which is important thing for a team like Arizona, which doesn't have that big budget. I think there was a couple of top prospects that they said right off the bat, listen, you're not touching these two guys. So they didn't give up two of their marquee guys that they wanted to keep. And they said, but here's the deal, let's get them. But I agree with you with Chaika. I mean, it's the kind of deal that, you're always going to get picked apart. Guys like us are going to sit there and say, oh, it was a good deal, it was a bad deal, whatever. You have to have that courage to say, especially as a young GM like he is, he never played in the game. He doesn't have that background. He said, this is what I want to do. This is the right thing for the Phoenix Coyotes. And they went and got it done. So I actually think for both sides, they did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say if we did a mid-season general manager of the year, this would be the first year that the general manager of the year is going to be the Jim Gregory Award. I'd have to say he's my favorite. The team is much better than it was a year ago, and they've been on a steady rise since he took over with that team. And a lot of times the team's improvement, it's kind of hard to sort of quantify what the GM did. It's not hard with the Coyotes because of the moves he makes. He brought in Phil Kessel. Now he's brought in Taylor Hall. He drew the line, as you said, on players that he wouldn't give up, including Barrett Hayton, who was one of the guys I think the Devils wanted, and he just wouldn't part with him. So I like what he's done there. And they were the Coyotes, I think, at the time of the trade were third in goals against average. They were first for a long stretch. They were the best defensive team in the league. They've got great goaltending. They've got great defense, but they're 24th in scoring goals, and they needed help in the biggest way. And I think if Taylor Hall is the 5-time 30-goal scoring Taylor Hall, they'll get that help. If he's not, then. And the only thing I would say is I don't think Taylor Hall alone will be enough to make them a top echelon scoring team. Like, they're going to need probably one more scorer, I think. With the defense.
Well, to your point though, Kevin, I think you're right. But I think that one more scorer is already there. Like, I don't think Phil Kessel is played nearly as well as he can play. So I think when you get Taylor Hall in there, now some of the pressure goes off. The defensive teams don't have to just concentrate on Phil Kessel as much. So I think Taylor Hall you may already have that another offensive player there with Phil Kessel. He's now able to be more of a scorer now because Taylor Hall is there. So, but I'm with you. That it just adds to the depth. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I really like this team, and we all know that in the postseason it's really about defense, and I think this is sort of a Carolina Hurricanes situation. Yes. And just in terms of they've just kind of figured out now and they've got it together, but there's some talented players there. But I will say this, like, I think the Coyotes goaltending is better than the Hurricanes goaltending was last season. I mean, Peter Mrazek played well, and both their goaltenders down the stretch did a good job. But I think Kemper and Ranta have are just better goalies. I just think they're more skillful and more talented. So, and I think you got to give some credit to Rick Tocchet. I think he's done a nice job, with that team, particularly defensively. I think he's sort of has matured as a coach, not in terms of but in terms of his strategy and the way he approaches players and everything else. I think he's learned a lot, and I think they're going to hold out there in the Pacific. I think they're going to be one of the top teams. I don't think this is a fluke. I think this is who they are. Anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit too about Peter Laviolette. I know you put him on the spot, I think, before anybody else did, just based on the way you thought the Predators were playing. And then they, of course, it appeared, you're absolutely right, They did have a win the other night when I thought Peter Laviolette was in a little bit of trouble. And it was a big win. They scored 8 goals. But what's your read on him now? Where do you think they are in terms of the, Peter Laviolette being in trouble?
Yeah, I'm in the same place. I just think, if I look at that team, they are geared up. They're one of the teams that say, listen, we've got all this high priced talent. We're here to win a Stanley Cup. So if we get in the playoffs and we're not prepared to play playoff hockey, which they clearly are not right now. Now, again, it's still December, so a long way to go. But like, they haven't shown me in the past, even with him there, and he's shown that he can do it. But with this group of guys, it's shown that they're not prepared to play that playoff style hockey. And it's almost like, even, then they score all his goals in the last game. So I was like, okay, well, that's even more proof. Like, why aren't you doing it every night then? Where is that play? I'm not saying you have to score 89 goals every night, but be that offensive powerhouse that you are designed to be. They've got great goaltending there. They've got everything they need to have on the ice, but for some reason there's something missing. And he's one of the guys you feel bad pinpointing him as a coach, Peter Laviolette, but because, again, he's shown that he can do it. He's won his Stanley Cup, but right now with that group of players, he's just not getting them going on all cylinders. And if I'm David Pola, I'm looking at and say, okay, I'm not worried about my wins and losses. I'm not going game by game. I'm not going to say, well, if we don't win this game, he's getting fired. I'm looking at the team and how they've been playing for the last month, 2 months. And for me, I'm just seeing a team that is just not ready to play that playoff style hockey.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, that's why I don't like them too. You look at this Central Division, and that's a tough division, but you got St. Louis, and then you have Colorado, Winnipeg, and Dallas. All 4 of those teams have been much better defensively than the Nashville Predators, who are 5th. And, the Predators, in 33 games, they played fewer games than those 4 teams. They've already given up 106 goals. And Dallas, who's played 2 more games than Nashville, has given up 82 goals. Winnipeg has given up 97. Colorado's given up 91, and St. Louis has given up 95. If you're going to be a successful postseason team, you can't give up that many goals and as many prime scoring chances as they are. Now, the Predators have scored a lot of goals, and I think it's helped with some of the offseason acquisitions. Particularly Matt Duchene, I think, has helped, and I think they've sort of figured it out. But there aren't many coaches around the NHL that you can say are offensive coaches. But I think Peter Laviolette is one of those. Yeah. He likes that up-tempo game. He likes to push the pace, get up in there. And, that's really kind of been one of the criticisms of him is that, he hasn't been able to play kind of that defensive style at times, even though, as you said, I don't know, he got the Predators to the Stanley Cup final. He won with the Carolina Hurricanes. He got the Philadelphia Flyers to the final. He seems to get results.
Totally.
But this Nashville team clearly has underachieved. There's no doubt.
Yeah, they're not paying attention to, it's that lack of discipline. I talked about last time, I think, when Ryan Johansson got that elbowing penalty. I think he got suspended for or whatever, but it's just like it was a totally undisciplined play. It wasn't concentrated. Like, is this going to help us win the hockey game? It was some play that outside there that it was like, okay, we're not concentrating on the team play. And you said it very well. Peter Laviolette has shown that he can do it. But with this group, they're just not paying attention to the message that he's sending. So, hey, before I forget, and I hope we're done with Peter Laviolette, one topic I wanted to touch on. We lost an old teammate of mine, Scott Kleinendorst. Recently, he'd been involved in a nasty accident. He's working up in northern Minnesota in some working accident, and I think it's back like December 7th when it actually happened. We just lost him. So he was. I remember him coming up with the Rangers. He was one of those quiet guys, and we were a bunch of smart asses and making fun and everything. But he competed hard, and he's a tough player on the ice, and really sad to see him. And I think he was 59 years old. Really sad to see him go. But I just thought we'd throw that in there.
Well, and that's actually an appropriate transition because I received the news of his death from Barry Beck on our Facebook page, and Barry Beck has also been giving us news about Mark Pavelich, Tom, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. But Mark Pavelich is a 1980 Olympian, was a very important player on that team, a highly skilled performer. Probably hasn't gotten enough credit for what a terrifically skilled player he was. Very important to that 1980 team. I can't stress that enough. And he's gotten himself in a little bit of trouble. And Tom, why don't you explain it better? You played with him, you knew him well.
Yep.
Explain what's going on with Mark.
Well, first of all, and you said, well, one of the best team players I have ever played with. He's a funny little northern Minnesota guy who just he wanted to play hockey. He was not like, we obviously have a rule going to games and traveling that we have to wear a suit and tie. And Mark was the kind of guy that when he dressed on a normal day, he would have a pair of corduroy pants and a flannel shirt on. So Mark would go by the rule of the book. He says, okay, if I'm supposed to have a suit jacket and a tie, so he would just take that same pair of corduroy pants and a flannel shirt, put on a corduroy jacket, and put a tie on. And he was following the rules. That was, he had what it needed to do. And you know what? We'd make fun of Pav, and he could care less. He was a fun-loving guy who, and I'll tell you what, he was a fun-loving guy. But when he showed up to the rink to work, he worked as harder than anybody else. So Mark, after the game was done, moved up into the kind of basically went out and lived in the woods somewhat. Him and his wife built a home out in northern Minnesota. The story, from what I understand, is that he, his wife had passed away. He had a neighbor. They'd gone out fishing, and he accused the neighbor of spiking his beer. And how it all happened after that, I'm not sure. But apparently, Mark attacked the neighbor physically, and the neighbor had some broken bones and everything like that. And it was a criminal event, and the police came and arrested Mark, and he was evaluated, and it was determined that he was unfit to stand trial for mental reasons. And I think the last ruling from the judge was that he would stay incarcerated for at least a year while they evaluated him and tried to get him help. So there's a whole process that goes into place. And I know sometimes people get frustrated, like, Mark was this former NHL player. Why isn't the NHL or the NHLPA or the NHL alumni stepping in? And I just want to make sure everybody understands the NHL and the NHLPA both contribute pretty sizable amount of money to the NHL alumni for these kind of instances. So there's money there to help the players. But the player, it can't be that the alumni goes running to the player and forces him to get help. There's laws involved. There's privacy laws and everything. They can't make him do anything. So he has to reach out and ask for help. That has happened in Mark's case, and he is getting help. So it's a tough one. Listen, again, I love Mark to death. He's a former teammate of mine, but he had committed a crime, and he's deemed to be mentally ill at this point. So he needs to get the proper help, and he is getting that help, and hopefully the best comes from Mark's case.
Yeah, and this is a very complicated story because of the ongoing debate in the hockey world about the significance of CTE. And I know there's been some discussion about whether Mark does or doesn't have it. There's no good diagnosis of it while you're alive. Usually they make that determination after death when they can study your brain. So we just don't know, is this mental illness? Is this CTE? Nobody seems to know for sure. And that just, I think it exasperates the whole situation as well. The unknown. But I will say this, I've been so impressed with Barry Beck on Facebook, and people have said, once a captain, always a captain in the NHL. And he seems to have sort of taken charge of this, making sure everybody's aware of what's going on. If people want to send messages, he's put out ways to do that. He's been a good captain, hasn't he, Tom?
He has. My only concern with all that is that I don't want to see that the NHL and the NHLPA and NHL alumni get painted with a brush that says they aren't taking care of all these alumni guys, right? It's almost like, okay, Mark's case has been brought to light by Barry, so now he's getting help. And I'm sure you know about it too. And people do it for privacy reasons, out of respect for what the players are going through. But there's been lots of individual people in the game who have stepped up and helped other players, the organizations, the league themselves. And the NHLPA and the alumni as well. I just don't want to see the picture being painted here that Mark's case he's the only guy that's ever gotten help. There's been lots and lots of players that have gotten help from people, and it's done very privately, and that's why it's been so successful. That imagine if you're a professional athlete and you're a guy that was highly esteemed, everybody loved you, and all of a sudden you're going through some struggles, financial struggles, addiction issues, mental issues. You don't want the whole world to know about that stuff. So that's, I think, again, I like what Barry's done, but lots of players are getting help. I think we need to respect everybody's privacy and get them the help they need, and they are getting help. So it's a sad story, but again, the league, the NHL community really rallies well around players and make sure they get the help that they need.
Speaking of players who have had some difficulty, I was at the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame induction last week, and there were a lot of feel-good stories there. Neil Henderson, who had been involved starting in the 1970s, a minority-based program in DuPont in Washington, D.C. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame and gave a really kind of an emotional acceptance speech, and talking about getting minorities involved in the game. And Gary Bettman got in, and what I found interesting about Gary's speech is it was nothing about him. It was all about how the game of hockey has grown in America, and he lauded the grassroots programs and some of the people who have done good work, like Neil, of growing the game. And we're able now to see players coming out of California, and Austin Matthews coming out of Arizona and growing up a Coyotes fan and now becoming a star in the NHL. So he took the opportunity, which I thought was kind of fascinating and kind of humble, to be honest, and just sort of talking about how hockey has just become much more of a national game. But the sad story there, I thought, was Tim Thomas, who is inducted in the Hall of Fame, and at the press conference before the induction, kind of broke down and talked about that he basically, as he described it, had to go into the woods. He couldn't deal with people after he left the game, and he had trouble organizing his brain. As he said, every morning he had to sort of reorganize it to remind him what he needed to do. And he said he's not really sure whether it's concussion related. No one knows for sure. Here we go again, of a player who has struggled since he has been out, trying to do ordinary things. At the actual induction, he had a very short speech where he said, I'm not comfortable up here doing this. I just would like to thank everyone. I don't know that his speech lasted more than 3 or 4 minutes at most. It was kind of sad to see this, because this guy obviously was the dominant goaltender in the National Hockey League for close to a decade. I think it was like 9 years when he was such a good player, because he started late. He had to go over up to Europe and prove himself first.
Yeah, it is sad too, and I think that you mentioned the word before, the unknown, right? Is it a CT issue that's related to hockey? Is it something that's inside Tim when he left the game, having a hard time dealing with it? But either way, it's sad that players go through that. And then it's another one of those cases where, you'd like to think that Tim reached out to get help from anybody else. And if he didn't, I'm not criticizing him in any way. It's, again, these are proud athletes. They don't want to admit that they're weak in any way. But the only thing I'd say is I would encourage people that, anybody in life, but, in this case with the hockey people, that if you're going to deal with something, like, don't be that proud person that doesn't reach out for help, right? If there's something you're dealing with, go to people around you that care for you and love you. And we're all, I think that, and I'm going to sound bad maybe saying this, I think men are even worse, right? Doesn't mean that women don't deal with stuff as well, but men make it even worse on themselves, because they're viewing themselves that, they're supposed to be the one that fixes everybody else's problems. And if they've got problems, it shouldn't be that way. But I think, to me, it's like, I hope Tim reached out for help. I don't know all his story, and I'm not entitled to know all his story, but I hope he reached out to help or get help from somebody. And I'm sure lots of people around in his inner circle, his family, would help him. But even in the hockey world too, there's lots of people that would help Tim Thomas.
Tom, the holidays are approaching. Usually, we separate the season in terms of the second half and the first half. In your second half, who's the team that you think that maybe just puttering along right now that you think is going to come on strong in the second half of the season?
Oh, great question. Okay, well, now again, I am biased. There's no question. My former team, the New York Rangers, I just think I see that team. They've got a lot of young players. They have one night where they're doing great, one night where it just falls apart on them. But I've seen them progressively get better and better. Georgiev and net is playing fantastic. Lundqvist is still Lundqvist. They've got two fantastic goaltenders. I just think as the season goes on, these young players are going to get better and better and more confident and more prepared in their games. I just think I picked them at the start of the year to make the playoffs. I think they will make the playoffs, and I think they're that kind of team that when you get into the playoffs, they're a team that you don't want to face. So I'm going to say the New York Rangers.
I'm going to say, and I've talked about them before, I'm going to go with the Vegas Golden Knights. I think that team has a lot of talent.
Hold on 1 second. I need to jump in here. So your cousin, Barry Trotz, coaches the New York Islanders. You're not going with the Islanders.
I am not going with the Islanders. I think they've already kind of established that they're at top. I was looking more for a team that's just kind of sort of getting by. And I say the Vegas Golden Knights haven't been as good as I thought they were going to be coming out of the gate. I thought they've been a little inconsistent. But, much like you, I like their coach, Gerard Gallant. I think he gets a lot out of his players.
Yeah.
And I do like Marc-Andre Fleury a little better than you. I know you respect him, but I think he's a difference maker in that. But what I really like is just their lineup up front. I think they have 3 or 4 lines that, get things done. And they've done a great job of assembling a real team there, where they get a lot of things out of it. They can check if they need to check. They can certainly score if they need to score. So I look for them to be much better in the second half than they've been in the first half. But anyway, you've been listening to the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week, and we appreciate you for tuning in again today. And we'll see you next week.
Ho, 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 everybody.